everybody, Corey here. Today I'm going to be giving you a little bit of GM advice when it comes to overarms and how to run those and, like a JoJo's universe, a Persona universe, other games. We're going to be going over, the proper steps to create a character with your GM, and GMs how to, work with your character or your players to create these characters in anima. We're also going to be going over just a few more things like game phases and things like that so that everybody's, up to date with how to actually run a game of overarms and how it plays into all these different media or even original material. So jumping right into it, if you've read the quick start rules, you should have a pretty basic understanding of how the game runs. But, depending on whether if you're playing it with JoJo's, Persona, Shaman King, Fate, Soul Eater, something else entirely, that can change everything. So with JoJo's, when you're creating abilities, it's very, very easy to make something overpowered, and that can even be accidentally. So GMs, when you are running a game set in the JoJo's universe, always set the expectations with your players first. You don't want to... tell them, hey, go ahead and create your characters and we'll just review them when we get together and play. That's setting yourself up for so many issues, it's ridiculous. So make sure that the characters that your players are creating, the animas that your players are creating are all, reviewed by you ahead of time so that hey, bud, you can't, smash the moon into the planet. Hey, bud, time stopping affects the action economy a little bit too much, so we're going to have to tone that down. And work with your players in order to, bring their creations to the table in a realistic way for your campaign. And so the way you can do this is to set expectations with them right from the beginning by saying, hey, it's going to be, a game set in modern times in the 90s in, the United States. And then one thing I always like to do is ban certain powers outright and let them know, hey, this has just been too problematic in the past. Don't worry about, even thinking about making a character like this. Another thing you can do as well is to just tell them, hey, we can do, your power where you can stop time, but it has a monkey paw effect to it. And so monkey paw means that, essentially just because you can stop time, it also has a, negative effect associated with it. So maybe somebody is allowed to stop time, but not during combat. Or maybe they can stop time, but it also, stops time for them as well. Anything along those lines. I'm just spitballing at this point. But adding a monkey paw effect to a lot of the JoJo's abilities can curve them from being OP to making them absolutely viable. Then with like the Persona series, that's a little more straightforward when it comes to creating abilities. The way that I've run it in the past is that I pull up a list of, abilities from Persona and people can pick 3. You'll have to do some experimenting with how that works with your group. You don't want somebody to use Megalodeon from the get-go. So you'll definitely want to look at the levels and break down these skills. Persona is not a series that I would run with people who are not familiar with the Persona series. JoJo's is a little more lenient, but Persona if you're running the skills verbatim, you're going to have a little bit of a rougher time trying to get people to understand with all the different skills and terminology that there are in Persona. And I think that goes to say for pretty much anything else with Shaman King, Fate, Soul Eater, etc. If you are running a game for people set in these worlds or these universes with this media, you absolutely want them to be familiar with the source material. Maybe give them a few episodes to watch. I wouldn't give them a verbal rundown, or if they have watched it, great, but you definitely want them to be familiar with the source material rather than throwing them in. You can also, create your own universe where you can essentially have like superhero powers or anything like that. and still use the anima. I think at this point people are pretty familiar with the idea of, an anima, and especially across different media. You have personas, you have stands, you have, I'm drawing a blank on what the people from Fate are called right now, but there's these like guardians that essentially grant you these kinds of powers that you can use, and I think that a lot of people are aware of that by now, and they can grasp the concept pretty well. So if you are creating an original universe, obviously you want to catch people up to date with what's going on, and still set those expectations from the get-go of, where the game is taking place, what time the game is taking place, as far as, is it modern day, is it medieval, is it futuristic, set the expectations for powers, what flies, what doesn't, and then make sure, obviously, that everybody is willing to play in that kind of campaign, and that everybody has read the proper rulebook. So, going on from there, one thing that always helps is to create your character and anima actually with the GM. Even if your players are making it in their own time, you want to make sure that you're reviewing them as the GM, so that you don't get there, day of, like I've said, and and it doesn't work at the table. Maybe you've said to people, hey, we're playing a game of overarms, and one person says, oh, great, we're going to play JoJo's, and then the other person's thinking Persona, and you have a mix-up, or maybe their powers just aren't compatible with the campaign, things like that. So absolutely make sure that you have set that expectation with everyone of what is going on, what kind of campaign you're running, etc. But the reason you want to make your character with the GM is just so that there's no issues when you guys sit down to play. When playing D&D and other tabletop role-playing games, we've run into issues where it's, some people are using Unearthed Arcana in D&D, and the GM says, no, we're not using any of that, we're doing vanilla. Just always make sure before you get to the table. Another thing, when actually running a game of overarms, the book covers this a lot, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detailed explanation just yet. This video is kind of just to graze the surface, and we'll see where we're at. But always follow the game phases. In the game, there are 4 phases. There is combat, there is social, there's investigation, and conclusion. Combat is obviously for when you're fighting a enemy anima user, or an animus, NPCs, whatever. It's anytime a conflict is actually happening. Social is, if your party is split up, they're out doing their jobs, they're living their normal lives, or maybe they're together and they're just talking, things like that. Social is for essentially downtime. If you're running like a JoJo's group, a lot of times in JoJo, people are separated from the group. They're, talking to other people, or in Persona, they might be forming social links, things like that. So that would be at the time to do social as a phase. Then we have investigation, which lets the players know that they need to be looking into something, they need to be trying to find something, and they need to essentially just be investigating. And then we have conclusion, which is kind of like, hey, we're done with the scene, or we're finished with the session for the night, and this allows the players in character or out of character to, talk amongst each other, wrap up any loose ends, just anything of the sort. So these phases can be performed in any order. So you could go social investigation, social combat, social investigation conclusion. You could do combat, social combat, doesn't matter. These are just guidelines that help new GMs and new players to understand what they should be doing at any given point. And I feel like you can break down a lot of encounters and interactions in tabletop role-playing games into one of these 4 phases. So make sure when you open up the book and you're looking at everything that you are following these phases. if you're, an unsure GM or an unsure player. And as a GM, you always want to say out loud the kind of phase that you're in. So you say to the group, hey, we're in a social phase now. Go about, doing what you need to do. So if you guys are together still, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's the same day, you're going to want to go out and do your thing. Maybe we're meeting up. And it's also dependent on the time that you're playing the game. If it's in modern day era, they might be texting one another. They might be, messaging each other via social media. If it's in a older setting, there's not going to be any immediate way to get in touch with people, but they may know where they are just based out of routine and schedule. So you want to always try to, at least in the beginning, work with these phases and use them to your advantage so that you are keeping everybody in the loop as to what they should be focused on right now. So hopefully that clears a couple things up, and if we need a part 2 to this video, just let me know what you want to hear, and I'll try to help you out with it.